Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Hello dear students, welcome to another lecture, and in this lecture we are going to start with another topic for your writing skills, which is narrating an event, experience or incident. So as the title, as the name of this topic suggests, what are we going to learn in this topic? We are going to learn how to narrate something, how to describe some event, how to describe some experience or how to describe some incident. Now, a narrative, this narration that we are talking about is an oral or a written account of an event. So, if there is some event, there is some experience, there is some incident in person's life, you can either orally describe it or you can describe it in a written manner. Its chief characteristics are the graphic details, so the details that you give of that event, the dialogues that you might use to give the description, the characters that you include in giving that description, the element of drama that you are adding. These are all the things that make your narration very interesting. It can assume many forms, a narration can be in different forms. It can be a conversation between two people. It can be a monologue, just one person speaking and expressing himself or herself. It can be in the form of a poem, it can be in the form of a story, or it can be in the form of a drama. Now, you people should always try to make narratives as authentic, as original as possible by adding details and dialogues in such a manner that your narration seems to be alive. That means that when you are narrating something, the one who's reading it should actually feel that he or she can experience something going on in front of them. Okay? Now, what is the format of writing a narration? It is very simple. You simply write the heading followed by the writer's name and class. Now, for the language, as far as the language part is concerned, we need to make sure that the language is semi-formal. So, it is not entirely formal, it is not entirely casual, it is semi-formal in nature. Try to be simple but attractive and appealing. So, you can use a simple language, no problem about that, but your language should be very attractive and appealing. Avoid displaying your linguistic ability. Avoid displaying your linguistic ability means the usage of difficult vocabulary. Words that probably you've learned recently and you would want to show them off to the reader. This is not the right platform. You can use such vocabulary when writing an article, but when writing a narration, when narrating an event, some experience or an incident, we have to make sure that the language is very simple. Now, the content, what is to be the part of that narration? Factual information about some incident or experience. So, whatever incident or experience you are describing, you have to give a detailed description of it. The date, time, venue of the incident or the experience. The sequence of the actions or incidents. So, whatever are the sequence, whatever is the sequence of the actions, in what order did they take place, you have to describe that. Reaction to the incident. So, what was the reaction to this incident? You have to make a mention of that also. Now, a few points to be kept in mind when writing a narrative. Now, whenever you are writing a personal narrative, whenever you are writing something based on your understanding, we use the first person pronouns like I, and this draws the attention of the readers instantly. People are always interested to read about something which is the personal experience of someone. When telling the story, if something that you are explaining you're narrating is not truth but a story that you're fabricating, in that case we should not gloss over the details. That is, we should not spend a lot of time over the details of that plot. Since the readers have no prior knowledge of the story, a skipped detail will make the story haywire. So, the readers do not have prior knowledge, any prior information about the story. So, if in case you skip some point, the entire story is going to lose its value. Nobody will be able to understand that. Use vivid descriptions and words illustrating the narrative. So, the usage of words should be such that the narrative is well described. Since narratives are non-fiction, so they are obviously non-fiction, they are something which are true, something that you have experienced or somebody else has experienced, the element of fiction should be ignored. You should not add details which will not be worth believing, which can make it look as if they are fake. True stories also benefit from the writer's ability to use plot building techniques. If you are writing a true story about something, then that can actually leave a very strong impact on the writer and the reader. How? Because the reader would always be interested to learn, to read something which is new and interesting. Now, in order to understand how a narrative is written, I have for you 3 samples that will make this clearer to you. Let us talk about the first one. So, use the following notes to write a short paragraph of about 150 to 200 words, narrating an unusually rainy day in your area. So, what are you narrating? You are narrating an unusual rainy day. You are given with a few hints also. It says that there were incessant rain. Incessant means continuous rain. 400 millimeter in a single day. There were streets, lanes and road were inundated. They were all covered with water. Life out of gear. Everybody was troubled. Everybody was in a problem. Transport and power failed. There was chaos. There was problem all around. Water entered hundreds and thousands of houses. 8 people had died. The roads sank at several places. So, there were places where the road sank down. The road could not be seen. 2 bridges had collapsed and there is more rain which is predicted. So, how has this event been explained and narrated? Let us read that. I remember it was 10th August last year when it rained incessantly in our area. So, the date of this incident was 10th August last year when there was a continuous rainfall in our area. Since I am explaining something about my place, so I use the first person narrative. What a day it was. It poured and poured and poured, flooding all streets, choking sewage lines and bringing all life to a halt. You could see people dragging their scooters and motorcycles or pushing their cars out of the water, which had entered their engines perhaps. Rains are notorious for throwing public life out of gear, so the rains actually disturb the entire life of the people. That day was no exception. There was a power outage, so the power was cut, absolute chaos on the roads and helpless people trying with whatever was at hand to flush out rainwater from their homes and shops. Perhaps the only people who were happy were the school children, for some of them did not have to go to school. And those who had enjoyed playing in the rainwater obviously found it very interesting. Old Malhotra ji, my next door neighbor, who was sipping his evening tea, shouted on seeing me, "Do you know, Naveen Babu, 8 people have died and 2 bridges have collapsed, and the Met Office is predicting more rains. What shall we do?" Even as he gobbled the last bite of pakora in his plate. What could I say? I was more worried about my wife shouting at me for not doing enough to plug leaks in the roof. Oh, these rains. So you see, this is such a personal account that the writer has written. He's put dialogue in it. He's used names. He's used things like pakoras and wife shouting at him for not repairing the leakage on the roof, just to make sure that the reader finds it, very interesting to read. Let us read another sample. At a competition, you expected to win easily, but you failed. So there was a competition, you thought you were going to win it very, very easily, but you failed in that. Write a paragraph in about 150 to 200 words, narrating your experience and your feelings. So, why is it that I falter whenever I am closest to success? Why it happened yet again at the badminton tournament. I was playing for a place in the quarterfinals of the district level competition. My opponent, Dikshant, is not among the best players we have in the district, and I thought to beat him would be a cakewalk. So cakewalk, something very easy. But it did not prove to be so. 10th April 2020, Shastri Hall and the stroke of 11 o'clock will forever remain etched in my memory. Thanks to my heartbreaking 12-14, 10-14 loss to a non-entity. Was it my complicancy or the forced errors that I made that resulted in my loss? Honestly, I think I was a bit too complacent, too overconfident. I began with a bang and ended with a whimper. What the hell are you doing, man? I asked myself, and somebody seemed to say within me, that's what happens when you think too much of yourself, boy. I was perhaps the world's saddest and the most stupid looking young man in congratulating the winner. Picked up my bag and headed straight for home. Oh, the sense of shame that I continue to have. So you see, again, it is a personal account. Dialogues and personal comments have been used elaboratively to make it look attractive. Let us look one more sample to make it clearer. So you have to narrate an amusing account of your experience, a funny account of your experience when you were early for a train and had to spend some time in the waiting room with different kinds of people. So you are given with some notes, some hints. Indore station you are talking about, you had to catch the Gwalior train. The train was 2 hours late. A first class waiting room full to brim, so it was completely occupied. It was littered with baggage. Baggage was thrown everywhere. Passengers were sleeping, were eating, screaming, children were screaming. A girl was talking on the mobile. The floors were dirty and the bathroom voice, one could hear very loud discussions going on there. So how is the narration being done? After arriving at Indore station at 9 p.m. to catch the train to Gwalior at 9:30 p.m., the first thing we learnt was that the train was late by 2 hours. So, your train was supposed to arrive by 9:30, but you learned that it was late by 2 hours. The coolie deposited us inside the first class waiting room, which was full to the brim. My friend disapprovingly looked for a clean place to sit. He muttered, he whispered, "You call it a first class waiting room? She sat on her suitcase in disgust. The floor was littered with bits of paper. There was dirt, and above all there was spilt water. I looked at the sea of forces and some intrigued one. The happy, fat family of 5 children, grandparents and parents had spread their dinner on a whole bench. Their youngest one, who was a boy of 5, was generously throwing food all around the room. 2 of the children were using puris as airplanes. The grandmother was busy washing her hands under the chair. 2 men full of self-importance were discussing the latest politics in Madhya Pradesh, their arguments getting louder and louder. In spite of her mother's constant warnings, a young girl was busy with her mobile phone and continued using it till she boarded the train. I was impressed by a bearded, bespectacled gentleman sitting in an armchair reading a book by Shashi Tharoor, oblivious to everything around him. To watch people's behavior in public place was a fascinating experience. So you see, the person has, narrated, has described this incident, this entire scene that he saw at a railway station when he had to wait for a train which was late by 2 hours. And since in the question only it said an amusing, a funny incident, so he has actually tried to add a lot of hilarious elements, a lot of funny elements to that description. And with this, my dear students, we come to the end of this topic, which was very simple, and it only requires you to use your imagination and to explain something, to describe something which you've been asked to, adding dialogues, adding names and adding humor in it. So my dear students, I will see you all now in my next lecture.